Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now, this is another solved paper 2 of our 5090 O-level biology. This is the June 19 paper 2 and we're going to discuss this and let's see how we go along with it. The time for this paper, as you all know, is 1 hour 45 minutes, and you need to finish this paper in this specified time. And this, of course, is the June 19 paper. Now, looking at question one, it says food supplements are substances that are often added to a person's diet. These supplements may be in the form of a tablet. So, supplements, tablet. The diagram shows a label from a food supplement to be taken with a balanced diet. Components: amylase, cellulase, lipase, and protease. So, we've got four enzymes which you're going to be taking in the form of a tablet. The supplement may be taken by a person whose pancreas is not producing enough of some of the components shown on the label. Now, if you remember, this is the pancreas, and then this is the pancreatic duct, and it opens into the duodenum, and it makes these enzymes, and these enzymes are thrown into the duodenum, and they digest the food. So basically, the pancreas makes pancreatic enzymes, the three enzymes which are pancreatic amylase, pancreatic lipase, and trypsin, which is a pancreatic protease. The supplement may be taken by a person whose pancreas is not producing enough of some of the components shown on the label. State the type of chemical that the supplement contains. You could have said enzyme, you could have said protein, you could have said a catalyst. Now, each food group in the diet is the substrate for a specific component of the supplement. Complete the table by writing the most appropriate word or words in each box. So, the component of the supplement amylase breaks down the starch to maltose or glucose. Basically, it breaks down to maltose, but they've allowed glucose as well, which I do not agree with. Then protease will break down the protein to amino acids or peptides. I don't agree with the amino acids here either, but of course it's allowed, so I'm not going to disagree. And fat would of course be converted to fatty acids and glycerol. But if you had written fatty acids and glycerol, so this and is very important because a fat molecule is made up of three fatty acids and one glycerol molecule. You must know the basic structure of a fat molecule. Part 3 says cellulose is a component of the supplement that's not usually found in the human body. Cellulase. Cellulase is not part of the component. So using the knowledge of the structure of a plant cell to suggest the function of the cellulase component of the supplement. Now basically cellulase is going to break down, or you could say digest, or you can say hydrolyze. So if you just said breaks down cellulose, well, you got one mark here and one mark here. So cellulase will just break down or digest or hydrolyze cellulose, because if you're having plant matter, then cellulose is passed out undigested. But if you have the supplement, then it's going to digest that as well. Part B of the question is the supplement is taken in the form of a tablet that is swallowed, and each tablet is covered in a substance that breaks down only in alkaline conditions. Only is and highlighted in alkaline conditions to release the components of the supplement. So basically, it's a tablet and it is not going to release its contents unless it's an alkaline condition. Suggest why this covering is important if the supplement is to work effectively in the alimentary canal. Now, basically, the answer to that was very easy because you see, stomach is acidic, so the tablet contents will not be released in the stomach. Why? Because it is said in the question, it reads alkaline conditions. So tablet contents will not be released in the stomach, and this will prevent the enzymes from denaturing or destroyed. Small intestine has an alkaline pH. Tablet contents will be released, and optimum and fast rate of reaction will take place. So suggest why the covering is important. So why did we cover this? Because we had the enzymes inside it, and we did not want it to be denatured by the acid in the stomach. So in the stomach, the tablet contents will not be released, and of course it will be released in the small intestine, where actually it needs to work and it needs to digest the to the monomers, so that then they can be absorbed into the blood and then absorbed by the villi in the villi and enter the bloodstream and be carried to the liver through the hepatic portal vein. Then question 2 is the diagram shows the structure of a type of bacterium and details of the response of the bacterium to light. Fibers that attach to a surface and then contract to enable the bacterium to move. Then there are light receptors. Then there are structures containing a chemical similar to chlorophyll. Now that is something which you needed to read and be careful and understand it. And then it says it's the direction of light. So light is coming from this direction and this is moving towards light. So the diagram shows the structure of a type of bacterium and details of the response of the bacterium to light. So when light is coming from this side, you see its movement is towards this side. Now this is something which you need to see from the diagram which is given to you. And then it has these fibers and it has these light receptors, and it contains something which is like chlorophyll. So use the information in the diagram to suggest the sequence of events that take place when the bacterium is provided with light from the direction shown. Now that was very basic. Light travels through the bacterium, absorbed by the receptors, fibers contract, and movement towards light. So light travels through the bacterium naturally, because then it would reach the light receptors, because that's what's given in the question. The light receptors would absorb the light and fibers would contract and it will move towards light. So this was the answer that was expected of you. Then we go on to the part 2 of the question. Advantage to the bacteria of responding to light in this way. Of course, more light. So we've got chlorophyll. So more photosynthesis, more glucose produced. More light absorbed by chlorophyll, more photosynthesis, and more glucose produced. So this was all. There were 4 mark scheme points, and you have to give me only 2 to get your 2 out of 2. Then it said there are similarities between the functions of parts of the bacterium and the functions of structures found in the human eye. Suggest which structure in the human eye has a function similar to each of the following regions of the bacterium. So the A region was more like the cornea or the lens or the aqueous humor, and B was more like the retina or the fovea or the cones. Then the part C says the type of bacterium shown in the diagram fixes nitrogen. Describe the role of bacteria in nitrogen fixation. So basically nitrogen fixation means the nitrogen in the air is going to be taken up by this and it is going to result in the production of ammonium ions, which of course will then of course be converted to amino acids and used by the plant. The enzyme that these bacteria use to fix nitrogen is destroyed in the presence of oxygen. Suggest why destruction of this enzyme is likely to occur in the type of bacterium in the diagram. Naturally, this bacteria photosynthesizes, so it produces oxygen. So photosynthesis produces oxygen, and that, of course, was the reason why this enzyme would be destroyed. And then, of course, we come to the part 3, part 2 of the question. Suggest one adaptation that such bacteria may have developed to prevent the destruction of the enzyme. So anything which showed somehow that less oxygen present, yes, actually these bacteria have, there's something known as leg hemoglobin, and that absorbs the oxygen in these plants. So less somehow, if we there'll be less oxygen present, or if you can somehow keep the oxygen away from the enzyme, and that's what I suggested, that there could be a pigment which absorbs the oxygen, or maybe a mutation results, which of course results in the oxygen not killing the bacteria. So these were the 3 different points, and you only have to give me one. And as I always say, suggest is the difficult part, and that is what you have to think, and you have to not spend a lot of time on it and carry on with the rest of the paper instead of spending a lot of time on the suggest. It's only a 1 mark. Then question 3, the diagram shows the internal structure of a seed from a pea plant. Seeds from a pea plant are non-endospermic. Identify each of the parts C to F. C was the testa, D was the plumule, E was the radicle, and F was the cotyledon. The diagram below shows 2 seeds, one from each of the 2 pea plants of the same species. Read the question carefully. Seeds from this species of plant have either a smooth surface or a wrinkled surface. So there are only 2 types of surfaces, wrinkled or smooth surface. The type of surface of a seed is controlled by a single gene. The type of surface, read the question carefully, is controlled by a single gene. The allele of the gene that gives the seed a smooth surface is dominant. So the smooth would either be this or would be this. It tells you that. It says seed a smooth surface is dominant. So they can be either be this or they can be this. That's all. And they give the seed a wrinkle and dominant to the allele that gives the seed a wrinkle. So the wrinkled ones will always be the small r, and these will be the homozygous recessive. So homozygous recessive, because you see, if you've said it's a recessive trait, then it will only show if it is homozygous recessive. Then it says name the part of a cell that contains the genes, nucleus, chromosome, DNA. Any of this was correct. Then part two says define each of the following terms. That's a very direct question. Gene is a section of a chromosome which is passed on or inherited and codes for one protein. So any three, you could have given me any two out of these. Section of a chromosome, passed on, or if you said inherited, and codes for one protein. So we say gene for pepsin, or we say gene for insulin, but we can't say gene for enzymes because that enzyme is a very broad category. There are millions and millions of enzymes inside every organism. Then a dominant allele is a version of a gene, it's a type of a gene or a alternative form of a gene in which expressed always, even if one copy present. Even if it is this, it will always be expressed. So this is called the heterozygous state. So it will always be present, will always affected. Then we come to part three of the question. One pea plant H has a homozygous genotype that develops seeds with a wrinkled surface. Another pea plant J has an unknown genotype. So H is homozygous that has wrinkled. So you know wrinkled was this. Then when these two plants were cross-pollinated, approximately half of the new plants produced had peas with a wrinkled surface. Now I'll complete the genetic diagram below for this cross and state the genotype of pea plant J. Now we know the J must be, because you see, if you have this is what you have to understand. Then you have this and this combining, so this is this, and then we have another one of this combining, and then we have of course this. So we have, when do you have a 1:1 ratio, or this is a 2:2 ratio, or 1:1 ratio, and that of course results in, so the gametes of the pea plant H must be small r, this one and this one, and then the gametes of this would be this and this, because this is the only way that you can get a 2:2 or 1:1 answer. So this is what we had to get. Genotypes of the pea plant J would be heterozygous or big capital R and a small r. The photograph shows a species of tree frog. Each tree frog of this species is either gray or green. Again, only two types, either gray or green. The following are true for both gray and green, and they eat insects. They live above the ground in vegetation, live near water and lay the eggs in small pools, are sometimes eaten by snakes and birds. Gray tree frogs are commonly found in areas where there are many trees with a gray bark. And green tree frogs are more commonly found in areas where there are many swamp and marsh plants with green leaves. Naturally, you see, if they're green leaves and the green frog, then they're very well camouflaged and they're not being eaten by predators. And the gray ones are found in trees which have a gray. So this is something which you could understand from the question, the idea of being camouflaged. Now state the type of variation shown by the color, only two types. So this had to be discontinuous variation. And then we have tree frogs eat insects, which are herbivores. State the meaning of the term herbivore, feed on plants. Very simple, direct question. State the trophic level of the tree frog. Naturally, it is insect, so first producer, then primary consumer, and then the frog would be the secondary consumer, which is the third trophic level. So you need to revise the ecology chapter if you are still confused with this. Then it says use your knowledge of the process of natural selection to explain the distribution of gray and green tree frogs in different areas. So natural selection is, we have to understand, is an environmental thing. So first of all, variation is present, then mutation must have occurred, then the fact that they are camouflaged, which means they're not seen by predators, they reproduce, and their number of the certain number of population of frogs increases, and they of course pass on the allele to their offsprings. Then we come on to question 5. The diagram shows the carbon cycle. So we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we have living plants, we have fossil fuels, and we have living animals. and we have dead plants and animals. Now, of course, becomes very easy. Name each process K to N. Now, as we all know, K is what? K was fossil fuel to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and K has to be combustion or burning. Then similarly, L was what? Living plants to carbon dioxide in the air. This has to be respiration. Then M was photosynthesis. Why? Because carbon dioxide is being going out, is going to plants, so that has to be photosynthesis. And then, of course, N, the last one was dead animals and plants and the carbon dioxide. So bacteria and fungi are respiring, decomposing the dead animals and plants, and this, of course, would be decomposition. So basically, combustion, respiration, photosynthesis, and decomposition. Then we come to the B part of the question. The diagram shows two locations, X and Y on Earth. So this is X and this is Y. And the table shows the length of daylight at each location during a year. Look at it very carefully. This is location X and this is location Y. So Y is this one. Now, the graph shows the changes in carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere measured during 1 year at location X, right? Let's look at the graph very carefully. And the graph shows changes. You have carbon dioxide concentration here on the y-axis is atmosphere parts per million, and here we have the month of the year. So March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, Jan, Feb. So we have these different that we have to understand. So March, April, May. Now, if you look at March, April, May, what is happening at X? It's medium. So March, April, May is this. And then in the long months, June, July, August, I'm giving it another color. June, July, August would be here. So June, July, August. So this is here. And this is, of course, long. And this is medium, right? And then again, we have medium. So in September, October, November, it's again medium. So September, October, November, let me give it another color. So we have September, October, and November. So we have this. So September, October, and November was again medium. And then December, Jan, Feb. December, Jan, Feb was short. So December, Jan, Feb is short. So here we have, of course, short days mean so more carbon dioxide available for photosynthesis. So let me just rewrite this. Now, if we look at part one, suggest an explanation for the pattern of changes in the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere shown in the graph. Well, it's very obvious when the days are long, when the long days, we have more carbon dioxide removed from the air. So the carbon dioxide is decreasing, and naturally, long days, more leaves, more daylight, more photosynthesis, carbon dioxide used in photosynthesis, and of course, photosynthesis is faster than respiration. Now, the last is a 2 marks thing that you had to draw a line on the graph to suggest the change in carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere during the year at location Y. Now, I was looking at the exam report of this and it says hardly any student got this correct. So this was a very difficult question and I'll just show it to you, and I've shown it as a yellow line on the graph, and you had to do this on the graph, not drawing it here somewhere, but you had to draw it on the graph. Now, as you can see it, there is a trough first, and then there is, so this is the yellow line is the one which is going to be showing you this. And so I have just shown you, I've just colored that and shown you the difference. So how it was medium, long, and medium and short. And but then this is the yellow line is the one which I've shown you now for part two, which hardly any student got right. So please try to understand it. How did we get this graph? The diagram shows the internal structure of a human heart. It's question 6, viewed from the front and associated blood vessels. Blood vessel P, we all know this is the right side of the heart. This is the left side of the heart. So blood vessel P is blood coming from the lungs, and this is the pulmonary vein. Structure Q is the wall of the left ventricle. Structure R is the right side, so it is the tricuspid valve. And we know that on the left side we have this is the bicuspid valve. But if you don't remember these names, you can even get away with atrioventricular valve. So tricuspid valve on the right side and bicuspid valve on the left side. And then it says name and describe the function of each of the following. As you know, blood vessel P was the pulmonary vein because that's bringing oxygenated blood. Pulmonary vein, oxygenated blood from lungs to the left atrium. So you got your 3 marks for that. Then structure Q was the left ventricle, contracts, pushes blood, there's a high pressure exerted. Why? Because there's more muscle in the wall of the left ventricle and blood is pumped to the body, or you can say blood is pumped into the aorta. Then structure R was the valve. It's an atrioventricular valve, but if you didn't know the name, it's tricuspid valve. You could have got away with atrioventricular valve. Opens and the blood enters the right ventricle, closes and the blood enters the pulmonary artery, which is going to take the deoxygenated blood to the lungs. And this valve prevents the backflow of blood into the right atrium. So this was a very direct question, the essay questions, and these, of course, you can write as much as you want to, and you can get the full 10 out of 10. And these are very easy essay questions, which I'm sure all of you can score very well in it. Next, we come down to question 7. The nervous system coordinates body functions. Fine, well, we've read that part. Then, name the type of coordinated response that takes place as a result of a specific stimulus, such as the withdrawal of the hand from a hot object touching the skin. Now, that is, of course, the only answer is reflex, or if you said all involuntary, so this is the reflex action, which is an automatic response to a stimulus in which the brain or you don't have to think about it. It just happens. You touch something hot and you just withdraw your hand immediately. And even though you're talking to somebody and you didn't know and there was something hot lying on the side and you touched it and you withdraw your hand. Then the part 2 is the critical one. It says, now this was 1 mark, but this is now, as you can look at part 2, this is for 7 marks. Now, outline in the correct sequence the functions of each named type of neuron involved in producing this coordinated response. Now, this coordinated response means the one that we've talked about in this withdrawal of the hand from a hot object touching the skin. Now, number 1, of course, is the word impulse, which we use. Electrical impulses are transmitted. Then, of course, the synapse word will need to be used, but this is, of course, I'm going to talk about these in a little while. The first thing is when you touch something hot is from a receptor an impulse is generated and it is going to be carried in the sensory neuron and then it's going to synapse with a relay neuron and then of course it synapses with the motor neuron and then of course the brain is informed and that's called the central nervous system, or you could have said the spinal cord is involved. So the relay neuron and the sensory neuron all are going to converge into the spinal cord, and then this motor neuron is going to go to an effector, and that effector is probably a muscle because you're going to withdraw your hand. So the biceps muscle is going to contract and you're going to withdraw your hand. Now, in the mark scheme, the sequence must have been correct. The sequence was 3, 4, 5, and 6. So 3, 4, 5, and 6 points must be ticked before points 7, 8, and 9. So these should have come first, and then these should have come second. Why? Because, and somewhere, of course, you could have mentioned 1 and 2. So it had said in the correct sequence. So that was important that you gave me the correct sequence of it, and that would get you your 7 marks. Then suggest why damage. Suggest, I always say, is the difficult part. It is for the student who has to get a higher grade. So if you know it, either you know it or you don't know it. So don't spend a lot of time on it. Suggest why damage to a person's spinal cord may result in the person not being able to produce coordinated responses. Sometimes, damage to the spinal cord, the person cannot walk and he or she is on a wheelchair. So basically, if the spinal cord is damaged, that means impulses will not be transmitted. Information, like for instance, something's pinching you in your shoe, well, that information has to travel up your spinal cord, and then, of course, the information. That's how you come to know that there's something wrong, and there's a nail in your shoe and it is bothering you. So, impulse not transmitted, or it doesn't coordinate a response, the muscle will not be activated because information has to travel up to the brain through the spinal cord, and then of course to the muscles also through the spinal cord. So these were 2 marks, and either you knew this and you could write it relevantly, or you just did not know it. Come to question number 8. Name and describe each process that must take place in order to remove molecules of carbon dioxide from the blood of a person to the air in the atmosphere. Now we have a lot of mark scheme points in this, and the first one is diffusion, high to low concentration. In the plasma, we have the bicarbonate ions, and then of course these will move out of the capillaries, and then they dissolve in the water film, and then they move into the air sacs, and then we exhale it out, and the intercostal muscles relax, the ribs fall, so this results in decrease in volume. The diaphragm moves up, and the carbon dioxide is exhaled out. In the exhaled air, we're going to remove the carbon dioxide from the body. So we have a number of mark scheme points, and you see this was a 7 marks question. So in order to get your 7 marks, well, you would have to write at least 7 of these points, and maybe 1 or 2 wordings would have. Now you see, look here, diffusion and high to low concentration. But frankly speaking, is both of these are the definition of diffusion. So remember always, if you're saying osmosis, then give the whole definition of osmosis, like down the water potential gradient, across a partially permeable membrane, and that would get you your marks in that. Now coming to the B part of the question, plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Outline how plants make the carbon in the molecules of carbon dioxide into a food substance. Now that's very basic. Photosynthesis reacts with water, and light energy is needed to convert to chemical energy, and this of course results in the production of glucose, and we cannot have this process being taking place without the chloroplast. You can say chlorophyll, or you can say the chlorophyll pigment inside the chloroplast. To the last question of the paper is the question 9. Describe the pathway of water molecules from the soil through a plant and into the atmosphere. Root hair, cell wall, cell membrane, partially permeable, osmosis, stem, xylem, leaf, water film, air spaces, out through the stomata, evaporation. So there were a lot of mark scheme points for this, and you could have written all these points in maybe 2 or 3 points, even in one sentence. It doesn't matter. The question is that did you write that point? If you wrote that point, whether you wrote 3 points in one sentence or you wrote them in separate sentences is immaterial. You would get the marks for it. Like if you said the water molecule from the soil enters the root hair, passing through the cell wall and the cell membrane, which is partially permeable. Well, that will get you your 4 marks in one sentence. So please do not think that we mark your papers by sentences. Then coming to the second part, or the B part, explain how variation in one named environmental factor would lead to an increase in the rate of water loss from a plant. Now the factor, this of course the heading, which you need not have written, but I'm just giving you the heading. And if we said temperature, so if you said higher temperature would increase evaporation, so that would get you 1 mark. As only it was for 3 marks. So increased temperature, higher temperature, or increased temperature results in increased evaporation. That's 3 mark scheme points. Then if you said higher speed of wind, faster wind speed, so increased concentration gradient. Then more light intensity, so stomata open. This gets you your 3 marks. Then if you said humidity is less in the atmosphere, this of course results in an increased concentration gradient, and this of course is very, very helpful. So that finishes this paper, and all the very best, and thank you very much.